page ZBC News Online, as well as on our YouTube channel ZBC News Online. We want to thank you for joining us. We are continuing with our updates on the 2023 general elections held on the 23rd of August as we give you the results. But remember that we give you these results as we also receive them from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, which is the body mandated with the sole responsibility of announcing the results. I'm joined by Dr. Leopold Chakanyuka, our political analyst, to analyze the results that have been coming in so far, as well as also to look at other issues around the electoral process. In particular, Doctor, we are going to be focusing on the preliminary reports that have been presented by the SADC Observer Mission to the general elections through the chairperson, Dr. Nevas Moba. But that's in a brief moment. But at the moment, we want to look at the results that have been coming in so far. What is your analysis of those results in terms of how the major players in this election, the ZANU-PF, the CCC, have been faring in terms of the rural and urban votes?
I think, this was, I would say, a hotly contested election. And the beauty of democracy is it allows, the political parties or people to make their particular decisions freely and so forth. And they did so. And, of course, we have seen that there were areas where ZANU-PF, previously was, these areas were strongholds of ZANU-PF, and it managed to take the majority of those particular seats. I think it owes also to what they were doing over the past 5 years, the issues of road construction, the issue of dams, that particular development which they were able to do over the 5 years. I think it gave them an advantage because people were easily identifying the development that they were seeing with ZANU-PF. And again, when you come to urban areas, Harare, Bulawayo, you'd see that these were already strongholds of the opposition, MDC then and also CC, and they were able to get the majority of those particular seats in the urban areas where they had already been strongholds. So it's a very interesting, but one very interesting the results that actually came, which are very interesting, especially to political analysts. I think we need to do this as a case study. The area of Mavuku and Kodri Park.
Yes.
These, they actually surprised me in a way, because when I saw the results as they were coming and when you watch the process, the campaigning process and so forth. A few years ago, I watched a drama, where one of the actors was saying to, one of the prospective MP in that particular drama, saying, for us kuti tikuvotere tutakata kudya togo kupfeka togo kunwa then tozokuvotera. So and then you see what these people were doing, Scott and Professor Mtuli. I think they brought a different way of campaigning. They were able to bring change in these particular communities, change that was tangible. They were able to construct roads, they brought buses, doctors came. A campaign which was quite different from what we saw even in the past. So I would have expected, personally, for these people to win because they've been able to demonstrate.
Doctor, you have mentioned that in that play that you were referring to, people, the electorate said, we will strip you, so to speak, of whatever you are bringing to us. We'll enjoy your benefits, your work and everything, and then we will vote for you. Are you saying for people like Professor Mtuli Ncube, like Scott Sakupanya, it's only the beginning? They need to continue spending in these provinces and still work and invest in the electorate and expect support or a vote from them and a victory at some stage? Perhaps now we are talking about 2028.
Yeah, perhaps. And one thing I liked, I listened to a speech that was given by Scott actually soon after the elections to say, I'm not going to abandon the people of Mavuku. I'm going to continue with the development that I've been doing because I belong to this particular society. I wasn't going there because I wanted to be a politician, but I wanted to represent my people. So I think that shows a degree of maturity, and I believe that if he continues doing that wholeheartedly, perhaps in the following election people might see genuineness in him. But like I said, as political scientists, perhaps we need to research as to why influences people to vote for a particular candidate. Is it what is brought, or is it because of political party? It's a very interesting.
Do people vote for a political party? Do they vote for an individual? Do they vote for development?
Yes, because I would have expected people to look at the competence of the person. These people were able to demonstrate that they were actually competent. If they were able to bring such kind of development in the areas what if they become MPs? They would have done perhaps more. But, sometimes maybe the thinking of the people was like, well, if you come towards Christmas, maybe you are coming because you just want, me to be happy because it's Christmas. And then after Christmas, you are going to leave. Perhaps that could have been the thinking. But I'm sure if they're going to continue with what they've been doing, and perhaps it's also a lesson to other, contestants to say, for now, I think we should continue to be present in the constituencies that we want to campaign. Let's be present. Let's interact with the people from now up to 2028. Perhaps people, they will actually start to see the difference in our politics.
A very important dimension that you are bringing there, Doctor, in terms of the patterns, the campaigning patterns. Previously, we saw candidates who would visit their constituencies, particularly during campaign periods, and they forget about those people every other time. But now we have sort of witnessed a paradigm shift in terms of how people actually campaign. People are spending times in the constituencies, they are spending time with the electorate, they are attending funerals, they are carrying out projects. Some are actually on the ground and making sure that there is tangible development, particularly when you talk of issues of devolution, where people are supposed to be on the ground and seeing what is actually happening in their constituencies. But do you think that we are going to see this trend of a campaign processes continuing going forward into the future?
I think post this election, that's what we're going to see, because now I think people know that if you are an absent MP, people might not vote for you. So it's a challenge to those who have been elected and even those who might want to get into politics, that you have to take people seriously. You have to be with the people each and every time and make sure that you get yourself known by the people. They know the person in you, and when they are coming to vote, they are not necessarily looking at the political parties, but they are looking at you as an individual. If you are able to articulate the issues that they raise as a community, or the issues that do affect them as a community.
Let's talk about Scott, the response, the way he accepted defeat, and also offered to continue to be present in Mavugu. What lessons should be drawn or can be drawn in terms of how contestants should accept an outcome of an election?
It shows political maturity, that a person goes expecting to win. You would have used your own resources, right, to campaign and so forth. And then you lose in that particular seat, but you then accept. That's how democracy is supposed to be. To say, this issue is not only about me. Of course, yes, I was expecting to win, but the people might have a different opinion, or they might not have necessarily shared the same objectives as I shared. And at the end of the day, the people are the ultimate winners. So if people decide to vote for a particular candidate, what we need to do is to respect what the people would have said, because it's all about the people. The people are choosing their leaders, and those leaders that they've chosen are the leaders that they want. It's a democracy. We are a very free democracy, and we allow people to vote freely and to exercise that particular democracy. And they had done it. They exercised that particular right, and they voted for their candidate freely, and we have to respect what the people want.
Now, you can see there on the screen, that's the Masvingo provincial election results for the 2023 general elections. You see 25 constituencies in the province. ZANU-PF won 23 of those constituencies, and the CCC got 2. This is where also the party got the highest number of votes, in that's the ZANU-PF party. And we have Roy Bila of Chiredzi North with 18,696 votes, Sheila Chikomo of Mwenezi East with 17,234 votes. The CCC won Masvingo Urban and Chiredzi Central constituencies. Looking at this outcome of Masvingo province, Doctor, let's analyze the figures first. 18,000, we've got 17,000. In terms of voter turnout, what's your analysis?
I think the people of Masvingo province, they really understand what it means to vote. And they know that it is my right to vote, and I am contributing to national development. It shows that the people understand the need to vote and the importance of vote, or even supporting their particular candidate. It shows also the popularity of this particular candidate, because when you see 18,000 people just coming to come and say, we want you to be in parliament, it clearly shows that they genuinely like you as a person. But of course, there is another factor that we also need to consider, especially when we're talking about Masvingo. This is the same Masvingo where we have the Bait Bridge, highway, which was constructed. A lot of people benefited out of that particular project. We also saw a number of projects that took place in that particular province. And these could have inspired the people to say, well, you know what? We want this government to continue to be in power because they've done so much for us. So let's go on in our numbers and show our support and appreciation to the party that has brought development in our area. Majority of the people in Chiredzi benefited even also out of the land reform program.
Yes.
When you go to Chiredzi right now, a majority of the people who are doing sugar are actually people who got land as a result of the land reform program. So you can't expect that particular person not to vote for the party that gave him life.
That kind of empowerment.
Yes. So you've been given a life, you've been given development, people have been built houses, people are now millionaires in that particular province. And it came as a result of the initiatives of the current government. So it makes sense that people are going to vote for a party that they can identify with and they are seeing the development. You go into your house, you see a television that you bought as a result of a project that was supported by the government. You are likely to say, well, it's fair for me to vote and support these people because they want development for me.
We go now to Matabeleland South, National Assembly results, Doctor. That's Mat South. You see there's 12 constituencies. ZANU-PF got 8 and the CCC won 4. Quite a remote province, Mat South there, but still again looking at the numbers in terms of what the ruling party got versus what the opposition CCC got, 8 versus 4. That was not very a loose competition, to speak, quite tight, half of what the ruling party got. But then what is your analysis in terms of the number of constituencies, in terms of what the ruling party got and what the CCC got?
I am saying, if I was from Matabeleland South, right, if I am voting and I would have passed through the Bait Bridge border post, I'm saying that's one thing that would have inspired me to vote for whoever I'm going to vote for, because I'm looking at the border post that has been there, that has been put in place, and the housing program that was all done in Bait Bridge, and right. So I'm saying, if I am going to vote, I'm also looking at that. The Bait Bridge road that we've just talked about gets to Bait Bridge. So I am saying, if I am a voter, I'm also going to be looking at that. But also the fact that the opposition was able to get about 4 seats, right? It means there was free access, right, of the opposition to get right to the voters. And in
particularly in that part of the
country. Which means, because, there have been reports, in the previous elections where people are talking about voter intimidation, that the opposition is not allowed to go into the rural areas, they are not allowed to go and campaign in so forth. But if you are able to get 4 votes, right, it clearly shows that they were able to get into those particular community and convince the people. Because they were not just competing with another party, they were competing with the party that had built Bait Bridge border post.
Yes.
They were competing with a party that had constructed the Bait Bridge road. So they were not just competing with a newcomer, but a well-established political party. So it clearly shows that they were able to go there and sell their ideology and convince people to vote for them. And that's the beauty of democracy. And we had people, a substantive number of people voting for them. It's good news to us because it shows that we are maturing as a democracy.
Of course, and that's the pattern, Doctor, that we always see, particularly when we look at the vote that comes from the remote areas, from the rural areas and so forth. Would love maybe to take a look at what happened in Bulawayo, but before we go to Bulawayo, that's Mashonaland West province, where you see there, that's in Chinhoyi, the number of constituencies is 22, ZANU-PF are getting 16, and the CCC the remaining 6. Now the trend seems to be repeating itself in almost every province except for Harare and Bulawayo, but there we see again that repeat of what we just see. So in Mat South, in Masvingo and so forth, 16 versus 6 out of 22 constituencies. What's your interpretation?
And the argument is still the same, that these were like predominantly strongholds of ZANU-PF, and not only stronghold of ZANU-PF. Like I said, over the years, ZANU-PF was able to bring development to the people, especially in remote areas. We saw, balls now being drilled in villages. So I am saying a person is looking at these two political parties or these many political parties, and you are saying, well, if I can get a ball, the things that we require, that we need, that brings development in our community, shouldn't I vote for these particular people? You are likely to vote. And another thing that we also need to look at is history, right? When you look at Mashonaland West, I think ZANU-PF can identify itself more with these provinces because of the history. This is the place where the liberation struggle started.
The second liberation struggle.
Yes.
1966 Battle of
Sinoia and so forth. So I don't think that, because people in that particular province identify themselves to the ruling party to say, we are the stakeholders because we fought during the liberation struggle, we fought to put this particular part in power, and therefore that could also be a factor that people identify themselves with the ruling party as a result of the history that they share with the ruling party, the support they were giving each other during the liberation struggle, and what they did during that. And when you talk to these people, they have a different thinking, perhaps from the new generation, because they are understanding of nation building, because they saw it all. They saw the period where we're under colonialism. They fought and they won. So they say, well, for us to safeguard our national independence and our sovereignty, we have to vote for our party.
You are reminding me actually of the words by President Emmerson Mnangagwa during his campaign trail, where he was saying the vote on the 23rd of August was specifically meant to safeguard the liberation struggle, to safeguard the legacy of the liberation struggle, independence, sovereignty, and other important aspects. So I believe, as you are saying, that connection between the people and the ruling party, between the people and the legacy of the liberation struggle could also be the reason why people out there still believe that the ruling party is the party that will protect continuously that legacy of the liberation struggle. We are looking at the numbers as they are coming in, and also the results that have since been announced by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. My guest today, Dr. Leopold Chakanyuka. And now, Doctor, we are there now. That's Bulawayo National Assembly results. Quite a whitewash, you would say. The CCC party getting 12 seats, all of them. That's in Bulawayo. Your analysis, all the other parties, ZANU-PF, MRP, FCZ, ZAP, UAZ, EFF, DOP, ZANC, and then the F Alliance, NEO. What is the trend in terms of the urban vote, particularly in Bulawayo?
Yeah, when you look at Bulawayo, this was originally, the stronghold again of the opposition. And, they've just simply continued with that. And because, we have a different voting pattern in terms of what the people are looking at, right, when they are voting. So it seems people in the urban areas, I think it's because of social media and, the fast life that we're living, perhaps we have different expectations. But what surprises me is, especially in the urban areas, because the opposition was in control of the majority of the urban councils, right? And then when we look at service delivery, right,
it's been bad.
Yes, my thinking would be, people are going to look at these issues and say, well, but you guys, you were there, as the mayors, as the councillors in these urban areas, but you failed to collect refuse, you failed to provide potholes, provide water, and so forth. So my thinking is, people could have been possibly looked at these issues to say, but like I said before, it's a very interesting case that we need to study on the
Country Park,
which,
for example,
to say when people are looking at it, do they just look for particular candidates, or it's about a political party that they simply want, no matter who is there or who is actually a member?
Doctor,
they're simply
when you talk about Bulawayo, the Country Park issue that we are referring to, Professor Mthuli Ncube moved in. Could it be the reason that perhaps it was a bit too late? Is it also perhaps for too late for the party that it moved in too late to address issues of service delivery in urban areas? Because we know at some point, even here in Harare, government had to declare a state of emergency in terms of sanitation and refuse collection in the city of Harare. Was that move a bit too late for people to actually wake up and to perhaps change their minds and say, we think we can move with this party that is now providing solutions to our day-to-day challenges? what was the issue?
Perhaps I think that could be a factor. I think moving forward now, the party that is going to win the majority, or that is going to be in government, now need to realize that sometimes, even though when you have urban cities that are being controlled perhaps by the opposition, but you also have a responsibility to make sure that to make these people know that you are the national government. Because at the end of the day, especially in Harare, there were contestations as to who is in charge of the city council. The city council would shift the blame to local government to say, well, we can't do this because the local government comes in and perhaps they need approval, and the government would also shift the blame to the local authorities. So I'm saying, moving forward, there need to be clarification. Right? If the local authorities fails to provide service delivery, it should be the responsibility, I'm sure, of the state to actually make sure that they do so. If they fail, like what they did to declare the
state of
emergency in the roads, I think that should be done continuously, and the central government should be able to monitor the development that are happening in urban areas, so that they end up not losing votes, especially in the urban areas. Because look at where they did well. You go to Epworth, some parts of Epworth, there were the issues of, they addressed the issue of accommodation, where a number of people were given title deeds, right? And look at the voting pattern. It's a bit different. Even where the ruling party lost, they didn't really lose with a big margin, because people had something that was tangible. So moving forward, I think whoever is going to be in power needs to realize that you have to be continuously present, even when the local authorities fail to chip in and provide for the people.
Chip in on time.
On time, exactly.
Okay, we continue to analyze the results that we have received so far. I believe next we should be going on to look at Harare. Yes, that's Harare there. When you look at the results coming in Harare there, Doctor, of course, another majority by the opposition CCC, the ruling party getting 4 out of the 23, I believe, 23 constituencies in Harare. Another indication or a repeat of the pattern that we noticed in Bulawayo, although this time the ruling party is salvaging 4 seats. What exactly could be the issue? Is it that the urban electorate does not believe in the ruling party? Is it the issue of ideologies? Is it the issue of a youthful vote? What are the issues that should be perhaps addressed by the ruling party for it to be able also to have a sizable number of seats in the urban areas?
Firstly, I think, for me, I think, I would have thought perhaps the delays that happened with the voting, especially in Harare and Bulawayo, would have had an impact in contrary to reports that we actually had. But it seems like those delays did not in any way affect the voting patterns, especially in the urban areas where these delays happened, because most of these seats were previously opposition, right? And they still went on to win with very convincing numbers in some areas, which means the delays actually did not affect people from voting. People went to vote even though there were particular delays. They still come back and were able to vote. But the fact that we also have an increase in number in terms of the ZANU-PF, it might be a sign. I given an example of Epworth, where you had people given title deeds and so forth. Even the area of Harare South, the issue of accommodation, because the president was saying we will never at any given point move people from their dwellings. Accommodation is a priority.
It is.
Of the second
it's fundamental.
Yes, it's fundamental. We need to make sure that people have accommodation. So we are not going to destroy people's homes. So I think that could also have been a factor in influencing the people. And perhaps the traditional aspect that, the majority of the urban people in Harare, they are, likely to vote for the CC. So it's not really that much surprising, again, because these have already been strongholds
of the opposition.
Yeah. Perhaps they have a well-established presence in the urban areas, because people in urban areas have access to social media, and they, we are, a community like together. So perhaps that could also have had an impact in people voting for the opposition as opposed to the ruling party.
We continue, and I think at this juncture we'd like to talk about the announcement of results. The way the results have been coming through, what is your observation as an analyst? Have they been announced on time? I know right now the whole of the country and the rest is actually, waiting with bated breath for the announcement of the presidential results. And there are some actually out there saying, well, ZEC is delaying, they are dilly-dallying and so forth. Explain, firstly, I want your analysis of how the results have been coming through and being announced so far. And then maybe your, the way the law, what the law says with regards to the announcement of the presidential results.
Yes, I think so far for the parliamentarians, ZEC has done remarkably well. Like they've actually decentralized the issue of voter announcement. Previously, you'd remember that we would all have to go on TV and then we watch ZEC commissioners announcing the results
one by
the command center one by one. But now it was decentralized, where the results were announced from the constituencies. So we didn't have to wait that particular long process where the results are taken from the constituencies right here to Harare to be announced. But results were being announced right at the constituents, which is a sign of efficiency actually in terms of ZEC. So I don't think that ZEC is also going to delay, because they've already shown that they are actually efficient enough to be able to announce the results as and when they get those particular results. And then when it comes to the presidential results, the law actually clearly says that the elections have to be announced within 5 days, right? And we are well within that particular period, right? So I believe that ZEC has also assured the people that they are going to announce these results on time. So I don't think people need to worry, people need to be agitated. The results are going to be announced as we have gotten from ZEC, that they are going to announce these results on time. So we should just be patient and I like to commend the people of Zimbabwe generally, that we have been able to exhibit the highest level of political maturity and tolerance. We have been very, very generally peaceful and very tolerant. So I believe that we are going to remain in this particular spirit as we wait for the results to be announced, and as we have been assured by ZEC, the results are going to come on time. So let's just be patient, and we are left with very few days for 5 days to to pass, and I'm sure the results will be out very soon.
We've been very mature. That's what you said there, Doctor. Let's now delve deeper into these issues. We have had these preliminary reports from the observer missions, particularly, excuse me, the SADC mission to the elections, where the chairperson, Dr. Nevas Mumba, announced that the body observed the peace, the tranquility, the calmness that was in the country during and during the elections. Of course, we expect that to even continue after the announcement of the results. But before we look at other aspects of his presentation, let's look at the issue of peace, the issue of the calm that has been in the country prior and during the elections. How mature are Zimbabweans? For many people out there, this was unexpected, and people are still saying it's suspiciously calm, it's suspiciously quiet. Zimbabweans are of age.
I think it's very surprising in a way that we are just 40 years into our democracy, right? And we have been able to demonstrate this kind of political maturity. It's just so surprising. It shows that we as Zimbabweans now understand, way much better than we used to, or than other, countries in our region, the importance of peace or the importance of nation building. We have now realized that the elections is just, they come for us to be able to choose our leaders, but we still have a country to build. So that level of political maturity, I think everyone right now agrees that these elections were very, very free. The environment was very calm. People were able to go out there and campaign freely. That is why you'd see these particular numbers coming, where the opposition actually has been able to make some inroads in traditionally what were called the strongholds of the ruling party. They were able. That speaks to our democracy, the environment that we were able to create as a country that allows democracy to grow, that allows our people to make a free and well-informed decision.
Doctor, I believe we have time to go deeper into that preliminary report and also discuss some of the issues that were raised there. At this juncture, we want to cross over to our Montreal studios for more in terms of what has been happening in the August 23 general elections.
Thank you very much, Justin. It is a beautiful morning here in Bulawayo. My name is Sibyl Maposa, and we continue to give you election updates, keeping you informed and, of course, in the loop, what is going on. And we want to hear from you. Remember to engage with us across our social media platforms at ZBC News Online, just to keep us responding to your questions and understanding what you also would like to know. However, Zimbabweans went to the polls on Wednesday and Thursday to elect their preferred leaders, and so far as results have been trickling in from various parts of the country for the councillors, members of parliament, and as we await the presidential results, which are expected within 5 days of voting. In the studio this morning, I am joined by a political and economic analyst, Mr. Stevenson Dlamini, to talk to us about these elections. Welcome.
Thank you, Spugele.
How are you doing?
I am doing well. Good morning to our viewers.
It's a pleasure having you here. Results coming through so far indicate that out of 194, 127 have gone to ZANU-PF, with Triple C claiming 67. What does this show about voting trends in the country?
Well, perhaps it could be explained in maybe two ways. The first way would say, when we look at the voting theories that govern the behavior of voters, voting is largely tied to the payoff that the voter anticipates. So you'd find that inevitably, the greater population of Zimbabwe is in the rural communities.
Is it really? Abantu bangaphi vele mina bengizibuza ukuthi are people in the urban centers ngoba zingathi zibaningi la?
Yeah, population wise sibaningi lapha. Kodwa nxa sesikhangela population yama voters,
there's no conversion.
There's no conversion. Yes. You'd find that those that would actively vote are in the rural communities. Why? Because their payoffs are directly tied. What do I mean by that? Uyathola ukuthi emakhaya yikho okule farming, yikho okule mining, and those resources need to be protected by ensuring that the policies that are in place are favorable to them. So it's also reflecting their access to resources, hence their nature of voting. And also in the urban communities, you'd find that their payoffs are more tied towards the opposition, which mainly reflects their need perhaps for job creation. Most people are in the urban areas to seek employment or not necessarily, or to create employment. So you'd find that their voting tendencies will align with the payoffs that are announced in the manifesto of the party that they vote for, because that is what they expect to be their payoff. So yeah. That's
very interesting. Would there be any relationship between economic standing, economic gains versus voting? Are economically emancipated people the higher voting population? What relationship is there?
Well, there is some degree of correlation between economic emancipation and the nature in which one votes. But not only that variable, there is also the level of sophistication, that is your literacy levels, that makes you identify with certain personas that would make you align towards a certain direction of voting. So you'd find that economically, inevitably, like I mentioned, resource distribution tends to be primarily because of the nature of our country, the resources are in the rural communities, and they feel they directly benefit from the existing status quo, and they want to ensure that the manifesto that they are voting for assures them that their property rights are safeguarded. So you'd find that most of them in those communities will tend to vote en masse, and also in the direction in which the results have reflected, because of the nature of the distribution of resources which ensure their economic livelihoods.
I think this also pins on factors such as agriculture, which is supported by Indwasa Pfumvudza.
Yes.
And then the mining sector, which also gets a lot of support from the government.
Yes, including the artisanal miners. And we know there are plenty of them in those communities. Most of them migrated from the urban communities to reside there for the purposes of securing their source of income in those communities.
So would it be correct to say that there is significant shift in economic classes that is happening in rural areas?
Yeah, perhaps we could.
Is there improvement in economic income levels or participation?
Well, rationally looking at it, by virtue of the distribution of resources, one would argue that those resources are not necessarily owned by the people in those communities. But but you'd find that with the discovery of exploration of those resources,
Yes.
Incomes generally would go up in the community there, because resources tend to gravitate, even financial resources would gravitate towards a place where there is some exploration of some sort. And perhaps the communities are also made better because there is some degree of infrastructure in most communities, especially where mining is at a professional level. You'd find that even the infrastructure there would start improving, and most people would find it much more economically viable to be in farming than to be in the urban communities and in pursuit of the
Bright
formal
lights.
employment. Yes, the bright lights.
So in Bulawayo, we saw the opposition whitewashing again. What does this mean?
Well, for Bulawayo, I wouldn't say it's a unique case, because traditionally we have seen that the opposition tends to have a stronghold in these urban communities, especially Bulawayo and in Harare. That's traditionally been the trend, I would say, or I would argue, and it's just consistent with what they identify with. Or perhaps one would say it's also reflecting that their outcry to say they feel a bit marginalized.
Could you speak into that?
Well, they feel that resource distribution is a bit skewed towards one sector, that is the capital city, and there's less, like headquarters of most companies tend to be in Harare than in Bulawayo. So their way of expressing that, they also would need someone who, if someone promises that, they would bring that to them.
That's a source of comfort.
Is a source of comfort that skews their direction of voting as well.
Do you think devolution has been effective, especially seeing that Bulawayo is still voting this way? If it's an economic indicator, does that also mean that we are failing to implement devolution?
Well, to tie it to devolution would not be quite accurate, because there are many factors that would lead people to argue that there's skewed development, because devolution is beyond decentralization. So in as much as it's aligned with decentralization.
What other factors would we incorporate?
Devolution, we could look at it and say it's one of them, but the fact of decentralization, lack of decentralization of most services, the fact that they are skewed to one side, that would also encourage them to vote in a way where towards someone would say, if you vote for me, I'll bring those amenities closer to you.
If you carry that seat, now I'm speaking to the economist in you, if you carry that seat with resource allocation from the budget, implementation, and how we are dispersing, what changes would you make from what is obtaining currently?
Perhaps what is obtaining currently is been skewed towards retooling and revamping the old industries. I think what we need to focus on is identifying the new comparative advantage that Bulawayo now has. There is technological advancement as well, and also the support not only of the traditional industries, but also of performance industries as well that can be packaged and exported. Those that still need that support, and we need to move away from the old paradigm of saying "Sivusele luntuthes tungai."
Actually, as Kulmenian, yes. We have seen things like Baker's Inn.
Yes.
Re-engaging on a larger scale, and they have manufacturing. We've also got clothing, textiles companies. Do you think it's going to bring back the status of Bulawayo as the industrial hub of the country, or is this just a little pulse here, but it's going to die in the long run? Do you think that the things that we have in place right now are sustainable?
Well, it's for us to determine its sustainability, it would need us to look at the value chain as well. Who is fitting into that value chain? If Baker's Inn is growing, its manufacturing base is growing, who is fitting into that value chain? Is the value chain being supported by the companies in Bulawayo, or is it outsourcing the inputs? If the inputs are outsourced, then it will...
Where we have wheat coming from Mashonaland, and then it's going to be exported.
Oh, yes.
To Bulawayo.
So the question should be, the value chain must be reflective of the empowerment of existing companies within Bulawayo.
Okay.
That way we ensure that the sustainability, because that wealth that is created, there are places to spend it on. So the question would be, have we invested sufficiently in the value chains to ensure that there is sustainability that will see the transformation of the livelihoods of the general population in Bulawayo? So
Khathesi sesithembe cold storage company ukuthi izasiyenzela. I think livestock remains
Yes.
one of the backbones of Matabeleland. However,
yes.
maybe the last point is CCC leader was rejected by his own people. What could have been the cause?
First temptation would be to say a prophet is not without honor in his own home. But perhaps it's also reflective of the disconnect between the needs and the expectations of his community vis-a-vis his manifesto, which appeals more to the urbanites than to the rural communities. So that could be also a reflection. Secondly, it could be just a proof of the continued efforts to preserve their seats by the ruling party in
All
that
right.
particular region. Yes.
Okay, for now we need to cross back to Harare, but we will be giving you more on this. Don't go away. But for now, Justin, kindly take over.
Thank you, Sibu, and we continue from our Pockets Hill studios here in Harare as we give you an analysis of, now we are focusing on the preliminary report that was presented by Dr. Nevas Mumba, the chairperson of the SADC Observer Mission to the Zimbabwe August 23 general elections. We mentioned earlier, we highlighted the issue of peace and tranquility that were acknowledged in the report, but we have other issues that were actually raised. Dr. Chekanyuka, there was an issue or comments that were referring to judicial capture in Zimbabwe, issues of the government not allowing, or ZEC rather, not allowing other participants, particularly Mr. Xavier Kasukuwere, to participate. Maybe you might shed more light on those issues, whether this report was spot on or it was amiss.
You know, the first thing I want to say is, when we invite observers, right, it means we want them to come and observe our elections and give us our opinion, but give us their opinion. But their opinion should be based on what they would have observed,
Okay.
not on what they would have heard or their imagination or what they expect, but it's based on what they have observed and what we ourselves are doing and what our laws and our institutions are doing. So from what I read from the statement that we made, they made a very interesting statement that they had about 68 people, right, in the country, 50 of which were sent into the provinces, which is not in any way enough to cover the whole country. Right? Which means their information was limited. Then from those particular areas that they were able to observe, they said 97% of the places they were observed, they were free from irregularities, which means that where they actually went to, the elections went pretty well. But then what then did they do? They then went on to rely on hearsay and information that they actually did not verify.
Okay.
They went to listen to the statements that were made by political parties, which they themselves did not observe. So they went on and listened to what the politicians, the contesting, were saying. Not all contestants per se.
Okay.
They picked certain political parties to listen to and to make that into their particular observation, which was not balanced, because they were supposed to look at the issues as they were. And it also shows a bit of lack of understanding perhaps on how our system operates. You have the issue of the courts. We as Zimbabweans, we understand how our courts operate, the independence of our courts, how our courts makes decisions. If a decision is made by the court in Zimbabwe, even the executive has no powers to make a judiciary review or to force a court to make a different decisions. The courts made decisions that were even favorable to the opposition, especially the case of the 12 MPs, right? But the observer mission did not make mention of that. But they went on to say the judiciary is captured. Who had said that the judiciary is captured?
I want
is
us,
the opposition.
I want us to continue on that line, on that discussion, perhaps later on. But right now, we want to cross over to the command center for more for a press briefing there. Let's cross over right now. Crossing over to the National
Zimbabwe.
Command Center.
Welcome to our continued coverage of the prevailing electoral processes. We are coming through to you from Ambassador Hotel right here in Harare, where there is the Pan-African Foundation for Socio-Political Convention Trust, one of the observer missions that is going to be giving us its preliminary findings of the electoral processes. And with me is Molin Sambo, who is going to take us through the processes of this press conference. Molin.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Molin Sambo. I'm the Director of Ceremony of the Pan-African Foundation Trust. We are going to give you preliminary statement on the 2023 harmonized election. I will start by introducing my colleagues. There is our head of the Pan-Election Observer Mission, which is Mr. W. Mangaza. You can stand up. Secondly, we are going to have Wallace M., our observer team. Thirdly, we are going to have Lawrence, is also our observer team. And finally, we have got Zimbabwe, which is also part of our observer team. So Zimbabwe is going to give us our welcome remarks. Over to you, Ms. Zimbabwe.
All right, thank you very much, our MC, for the eloquent introductions. Good morning once again, everyone. I would like to begin by thanking you and welcome you all to the Pan-African Foundation for Socio-Political Convention Network, that is PAN, Trust Electoral Observer Mission's preliminary statement on the conduct of the 2023 harmonized elections at such short notice. Pan-African Foundation for Socio-Political Convention Network Trust, that is PAN Trust, is duly registered through a notarial deed of trust. The organization seeks to rekindle and champion Pan-African ideals in Zimbabwe, Africa, and the diaspora. Further, the PAN Trust participates in electoral process through Pan-African lenses. Our values are unity, integrity, authenticity, and pragmatism. Our presentation, which looks at the conduct of 2023 harmonized, will touch the pre-election period, the actual election day, and post-election period. Without further ado, allow me to introduce our head of the Pan-Election again, Observer Mission, Mr. W. Mangaza, who shall take us through the preliminary report. I thank you.
Thank you very much to you all being by. At least you gave a brief background of who we are. And so I'm sure all of you here gathered here are now in the know of who Pan-African Foundation for Socio-Political is here. Without much ado, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you all for joining us as we present our preliminary statement on the conduct of the 2023 harmonized elections held from the 23rd to the 24th of August 2023. The Pan-African Foundation Trust Electoral Observer Mission was composed of 450 long-term observers who were deployed to the 10 provinces across Zimbabwe, namely Harare, Mashonaland East, Mashonaland West, Mashonaland Central, Midlands, Masvingo, Matabeleland North, Matabeleland South, Bulawayo, and Manicaland. Our preliminary statement covers the political and security environment, legal framework, election management, delimitation of constituencies, the voters' role, freedom of assembly, freedom of expression, nomination of candidates, and fees. Participation of women as candidates. Judiciary independence. Postal voting and coverage of elections by state-owned media. A. Political and security environment. Our observation and also feedback from various stakeholders points to the fact that the political and security environment was generally calm and peaceful. There were, however, isolated incidences of inter-party skirmishes on the voting day where alleged Citizens Coalition for Change CCC members aggressively confronted Forever Associates of Zimbabwe FAZ officials conducting exit poll surveys at polling stations in Bikita and Norton. The Pan-African Electoral Observer Mission knows that these surveys were being conducted beyond the 300-meter boundary from the polling station as per electoral regulations. The confrontations have been condemned as an interference in intra-party processes which are not in violation of the Electoral Act nor the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission's regulations and guidelines. There were also reported cases of political violence in Mount Darwin, Muzarabani, and Norton, where ZANU-PF officials were physically manhandled. Further, we also noted the reported death of one Tinashe Sungo, may he so rest in peace, in an alleged case of political violence. The Zimbabwe Republic Police has issued a statement that they are investigating the matter. B. The legal framework. The 2023 harmonized elections were held in accordance with the Constitution of the Republic of Zimbabwe and the Electoral Act, Chapter 2.13, and electoral regulations. In accordance with Section 158, subsection 1A of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, revised 2020-2013, general elections should take place not more than 30 days before the expiry of the 5-year period specified in Section 143 of the Constitution. The Pan-Electoral Observer Mission notes that the 2023 harmonized elections were duly held in accordance with the laws of Zimbabwe. C. Election management. Elections in Zimbabwe are managed by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, acronym ZAC, an independent body which is mandated by the law of the land. Delays were observed with regard to local authorities' ballot papers distribution. The Pan-African Foundation Electoral Observer Mission, however, commends the extension of voting to give all voters a chance to exercise their democratic rights. G. Delimitation of constituencies. Our take on the matter is that this was done in accordance with the laws of Zimbabwe where disputes arose. It was dispensed with by the courts. E. The voters' roll. The Pan-African Foundation Election Observer Mission notes the concerns around the releasing of the voters' roll in a searchable and analyzable format. We also further note ZEC's position that the voters' roll is a security document. ZEC redirected all interested parties that they had an opportunity to inspect the voters' roll as provided by the Electoral Act and therefore did not have to wait for the soft format. We commend transparency on the posting of the voters' roll at the polling stations by ZEC on the polling days. F. Freedom of assembly. The political parties were given space to campaign. The Zimbabwe Republic Police received notifications from political parties to hold political gatherings. However, it was noted that some applications to hold campaign gatherings made by the CCC, that is Citizens Coalition for Change, ZANU-PF, and other political parties may have not been approved due to logistical and operational challenges on the part of the Zimbabwe Republic Police, but not designed to prejudice any political party per se. In this regard, the Pan-Election Observer Mission therefore discounts the selective application narrative against the Zimbabwe Republic Police. Both the main political parties, CCC and ZANU-PF, had their applications rejected in some instances. G. Freedom of expression. The Pan-African Observer Election Mission also notes concerns around the Patriotic Act, which is an amendment to the Criminal Law Codification and Reform Act, Chapter 9.23, number 23 of 2004. The amendment criminalizes, open quote, the willful injuring of the sovereignty and national interest of Zimbabwe and any communication between two or more persons, whether happening in person or virtually or by combination of both, which involves or is facilitated or convened by a foreign government or any of its agents, proxies, or entities, close quote. The Pan-African Foundation Election Observer Mission notes that the criminalization of such offenses is active in countries such as the United Kingdom, the United States of America with the Lanham Act, and much of the Western world. H. Nomination of candidates and nomination fees. The Pan-African Foundation Election Observer Mission noted the rather high litigation around the 2023 harmonized elections. We also observed that all the cases were brought to conclusion before the election date. In this regard, we note the general sentiment that the fees were exclusionary and restrictive. I, female candidates. The Pan-Election Observer Mission noted that Zimbabwe has a well-pronounced gender parity policy which allows for women to participate in politics on an equal basis with their male counterparts. The political field has its own dynamics which are independent and fluid. However, we implore more women to be more active in politics. J, judiciary independence. The Pan-African Foundation Election Observer Mission acknowledges the separation of powers doctrine at play in Zimbabwe and is of the view that the judiciary should remain independent. The legal challenges brought before the courts involving the 12 CCC National Assembly candidates in Bulawayo who had allegedly filed their nomination papers out of time had their nominations reinstated. The Xavier Kasukuwere case was also dealt with in accordance with the law without undue influence of his past political stature and history. The presidential female candidate, Elizabeth Valerio, had her nomination upheld by the courts. At a glance, the Pan-African Election Observer Mission is of the view that the conclusion of these cases point to an efficient and impartial judiciary. K, coverage of elections by state-owned media. We noted some distinct hostilities towards the state media institutions from the CCC leadership, in particular its now former spokesperson, Fadzai Mahere, and the party's leader and presidential candidate, Mr. Nelson Chamisa. We also made inquiries with the state broadcaster, the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation, who advised that the political advertising that they were flighting on their stations were sponsored and paid for. We made similar inquiries with independent radio and television stations, namely ZFM, Star FM, ZTN Prime, NRTV, and 3KTV, who gave similar explanations that the political advertising flighted on their stations were all paid for, and all parties were welcome to place their material and pay for them. The Pan-African Foundation Electoral Observer Mission contends that there was a fair coverage of political players. Postal voting. The law provides for postal voting by members of the Zimbabwe Republic Police on national duty and other officials serving at Zimbabwe's foreign missions. The alleged forced voting for a particular political party by police officers lacks merit. The Pan-African Foundation Electoral Observer Mission affirms that postal voting was done in terms of the Electoral Act of Zimbabwe. Observations on election days 23 to 24 August 2023. The Pan-African Foundation Electoral Observer Mission team covered across all 10 provinces on the 23rd and the 24th of August 2023. Some of our observations include the following. 1. The delays in the polling starting time was experienced in most parts of the country were due to the fact that some polling stations had not received the necessary voting materials on time, but we were satisfied that ZEC acknowledged, Zimbabwe Electoral Commission acknowledged this anomaly and extended the voting time to ensure that the 12-hour time voting period was achieved for all affected polling stations. We also noted that the environment and the mood on voting days was generally peaceful and orderly. Some voters did not appear on the voters' roll. That is number 3. Some voters did not appear on the voters' roll. It turned out that some voters had not checked their names when the voters' roll lay for inspection. 4. In some instances, some voters had come to the wrong polling station, whilst others did not have the correct identity documents, such as the national identity card or a valid passport. People with disabilities, that is number 5, PWDs, stations. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, this sums up our preliminary statement on the conduct of the 2023 harmonized elections held on the 23rd to the 24th of August 2023. As you are all aware, the electoral processes are still ongoing, and we shall issue out our final report with detailed recommendations when the whole process has been concluded. I thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. As we proceed with our conference, we have reached a time where it becomes more of a conversation or a discussion. I'm here to facilitate the questions and the answers that will be burning inside of you. So I'll take the first 3 questions among us, you. There's 1 there, 2, and 3. So you just introduce yourself and then we'll answer you directly.
Thank you very much. I'm Zimbabwe, political analyst. My question is, what's your comment on the issues of President around the task force in relation to this election? Thank you.
May you repeat your question?
Okay. My question is, what's your comment on the issues of President around the voters' roll in relation to this election?
Okay, I'll give to the director to answer you.
Thank you very much, Mr. D. Maposa. The voters' roll, as we all understand, it is the prerogative of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, and which acts under the Zimbabwean laws. We, as an observer mission, actually, when we visited the different polling stations, we found out that This time was the first time in Zimbabwe's political history to find a voter's roll displayed at a polling station. Before, we never experienced that. And so, according to our observation, we thought that probably it was a move in the right direction when it comes to the voters' roll. Because most of the time, people would come without knowing, and then also just finding out after getting at the polling station that one's name is not on the voters' roll. So people were free to go and check outside the polling station and then know which polling tent or room they were supposed to enter and cast their votes.
Okay, the second question.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You mentioned about the activities which were conducted by forever associated Zimbabwe parts, specifically in the Noto. You mentioned about the activities which were conducted by forever associated Zimbabwe parts, specifically in the Noto. To what extent do the activities affect the outcomes of the general elections?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, you didn't say who you are and the publication which you come from.
Sorry, I'm Blessing Kamrai, as a political analyst.
Thank you, Blessing. Right, the reported probably skirmishes in Norton and Bikita. As far as this report is concerned, we were told, and from our observation with our investigation, that they were out of the 300-meter perimeter boundary. And so, which means any activities which occurred outside the 300-meter perimeter boundary and did not affect the voting process were not in contravention of the voting laws of the Electoral Act. And then, secondly, we were also informed that the FAS, Forever Associates of Zimbabwe, I understand, is a registered entity, is a registered trust according to the laws of Zimbabwe, and which is just as good as the ZESNI, Zimbabwe Electoral Support Network, and the other legal entities which also participated in the electoral process or which were assisting in the electoral process. And so we understand that they were simply carrying out their mandate as according to their registration requirements.
I believe you answered, Mr. Political Analyst. Let's have another question. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Ruth from Daily News. Maybe just to add on, according to the Electoral Act, Section 184, I'll read for the benefit of us all. It says, no person who has voted at an election shall in any legal proceedings, whether taken to question the election or retain or otherwise, be required to stand for whom he or she has voted. I just wanted to find out this exit poll survey. What is the nexus between this clause of the Electoral Act and the poll survey which was being conducted by Forever Associates of Zimbabwe? And also, maybe on top of that, can we then say this election is credible? Since you mentioned some of the flaws which you reported as a commission.
Okay.
Thank you, Tendongara. Let me start with the first one, which is the party, I understand, which was doing a poll survey. What we understand, according to our statutes, is that no organization or political party shall canvass, nor carry out any other activity, nor put on any regalia or any campaign material within the 300 meter radius of the polling station. So anything which happens out of the 300 meter barrier, I understand from our research and from our finding out, and then from our question, Zach said that it is not their business to control that, except if the first group was interfering within the 300 meter perimeter boundary. Yes, probably it would be a different story altogether. But as long as they were out of that, whatever they were doing, we were not in control. No one would be in control. Neither ZEC would be in a control. Neither would the security apparatus be able to control them, because they were not interfering with that one. Right. On the credibility of elections, actually, as an observer team, our role is to observe, not to judge. So, but from our findings, we might acknowledge that yes, there might have been some flaws here and there, but we also acknowledge that the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission was quick in acknowledging their challenges and then quickly addressing them. And also even the head of state proclaiming a further day to make sure that everyone who had been disenfranchised of the right to vote had a chance to cast their votes. So that was done timelessly, so that at least everyone who was eager to vote had to get a chance. So I wouldn't declare, because I have no right to declare, but from our observation we can say that they were following what would be regarded as what is expected in our local guidelines of electoral processes, our regional and international voting processes. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe that answer was not half-baked, it was so eloquent. So, on the last segment of the questions, I'll take 3 again. One there, I see a hand, and the other one. So, you may start.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Innocent Mapranga. I'm a freelance journalist. Here goes the question. How do you see the arrest of 39 ZTS and ERC staffers? Isn't it a breach of the law on the part of the government?
May you please repeat?
Okay. How do you see the arrest of those 39 ZTS and ERC staffers? Isn't it a breach of the law on the part of the government?
Okay.
Thank you to Innocent Mapranga. We understand, as the Pan-African Foundation Trust, that those who were arrested, their case is before the courts, and so mostly as observers we do not comment on cases which are sub judice, meaning to say they are before the courts. So which means the police, we understand, they arrested them, and then the courts probably did their processes, and anything which is before the courts now, we do not comment on that. We comment on what is on the table.
I'm sure you answered. Let's have the second question.
question is, do you think the delay in the starting of voting has an impact on the election outcome? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much to you, Knowledge Ndlela. We acknowledge there was a delay in the voting process as we enunciated in our report. We do acknowledge that. But the delay in the voting process, we understand that the president extended the voting period so that no one would be disenfranchised. Also, polling stations, to those which we visited, which also opened late, they had also to extend their time to make sure that everyone, they had to make use of the 12 hours time limit which they had to use according to the statutes of the land. So as a foundation, we think no one was disenfranchised because everyone was given a chance to those who wanted to go and vote to make use of their time to go and vote. Thank you.
Are you answered, sir?
Yes, please.
Okay, then we'll take the last question. I see a hand over there.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Siso Njanja, a freelance journalist. On delimitation, to what extent do you think that the outcome of the delimitation report is bearing on the 2023 general elections?
Okay.
Thank you to you, Siso Njanji, for that question. The delimitation process is according to the laws of this country. And so it is the sole responsibility of those who are responsible for that. But what we consider is that everyone who was entitled to vote and had the interest to vote got a chance to go and vote. That is where our main interest and thrust was as a foundation. But when you come to delimitation, it has got its own processes and the laws. And then as an observer team, we have no jurisdiction to interfere in how the laws of a country are promulgated and what we expect them to do with their laws and everything of the sort. All we had to do was to observe the voting process if it went on smoothly. Thank you.
Okay, I believe you are answered, Mr. Njanji. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sure we can be flexible to take.
And that's a press conference by the Pan-African Foundation for Social Political Convention Network Trust on the conduct of the 2023 general elections in Zimbabwe, also giving their observations as an observer mission. And perhaps notable from that presentation is the fact that they acknowledged also, just like other observer missions, the peaceful environment that prevailed prior and during the conduct of the elections. And they also said the elections were held in line with the laws of Zimbabwe and were managed by an independent body, that's the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, which has the sole mandate of supervising and conducting the elections as well as announcing the outcomes of the elections. The foundation also commended the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission for affording everyone an opportunity to inspect the voters' roll prior to voting day, and also for displaying the voters' roll on each and every polling station to enable prospective voters to identify themselves and also to be able to cast their votes candidates. That's what the foundation noted. However, it also noted that some applications, that's prior to election day, some applications for the holding of rallies by the ruling party as well as the opposition CCC and other political parties were actually not approved by the Zimbabwe Republic Police, and they noted their concern in that regard. There was also mention of why the nation needs the Patriotic Act. That's in terms of defending the sovereignty of the country and its territorial integrity, and also defending the interests of the country from outsiders or others who might want to disturb the peace and, of course, the independence of the country. They also noted the Xavier Kaskwere case that we understand was also taken note of in the report presented yesterday by Dr. Nevas Muba, the chairperson of the SADC Observer Mission, which is what we are also perhaps going to delve into here with the analysts that we have. We still have Dr. Leopold Chaganyuka, but we are also now joined in the studio by Mr. Elton Ziki, another political analyst, to analyze further and perhaps get to understand what has been happening. And now we want to focus on this issue that seems to be cropping up, the issue of the dismissal of the case or the application by Mr. Xavier Kaskwere to participate in the elections. I'm going to start with our newest member, Mr. Elton Ziki. Your analysis of the comments. Why are observer missions interested, so to speak, in Mr. Kaskwere's application?
Thank you. Allow me to give context to your question in terms of the focus by election observer missions. Mm-hmm. First and foremost, we must understand that the credence and the credibility of the election is the checklist in terms of standard operating procedure of how elections are conducted. Mm-hmm. I'll come to the issue of the aspirant to and presidential hopeful Xavier Kaskwere's involvement within the reportage of the preliminary reports mm-hmm. that are being presented by the various election observer missions. Mm. When an election is being conducted, in terms of its impact and credibility and significance, we have to see in terms of the terms of reference to which the courts, in terms of the Constitutional Court, having set and determined whether that individual was eligible to participate, and within the confines of the Constitution with regards to contestants and the status of how they must be during the run-up to a poll. Mm-hmm. And that case was dealt with within the courts and within the confines of the laws of the Electoral Act and the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution, and hence the verdict mm-hmm. that he was ineligible. But what does that do in terms of the impact it has on the outcome of an election? And surely this is an individual which, in terms of scale and rate, would not see any impact of having to give something that is worth holding on to say, does it affect the credibility of the elections? This is the judicial process that has happened and taken place. Mm-hmm. And the verdict has come. Mm-hmm. What then other players and schools of thoughts would then want to ascribe or subscribe to various beliefs that they do have with regards to that outcome is neither here nor there, okay. And also may be permissible in terms of opinion. Mm-hmm. But what you want to do is to say, does that affect the credibility, the fairness, and the conduct of the election, of which this is what most observers are running away from. And if we are looking at the various statistics that have been coming forth, mm-hmm. though they may not be complete in terms of the outlook, because you want to look at all angles in terms of the qualitative and the quantitative assumptions of how a particular election observation mission would come up with a report, mm-hmm. and also gauge if that process is the credible and most plausible route to take place, mm-hmm. to take or to be followed by the election observer missions. So here, if we are talking about statistics in the terms of the latest figures that have been there, of the tallied votes and collated, you would want to see from the constituency levels. We have 210 constituencies as per the supreme law of the land. Mm. And we have major political parties presenting that graph to say as of the last information that I had, it was ZANU-PF 127, the Triple C 70. So you want to look at the issues of these results that have been agreed to at polling and constituency status. So if we have a verifiable, tellable, and concrete outcome, why then would the election observers be shy of really giving what they observed? Everyone, wherever we were coming from, we would want to see that there was a lot of peace, calm, to the extent that you would not even see an ant that was trampled on during the queues in terms of peace. So how would you take away such an ingredient and claim that and forego that the election was to a large extent free, fair, and credible that's in terms of peace?
Doctor, what sorry, excuse me, what Mr. Zeki is referring to is there are more important issues to be focused on by the observer missions, apart from the little or minute or insignificant case of Mr. Xavier Kasukuwere. But why are they continuously referring to this issue? Now we have this comment from the Pan-African Foundation for Social Political Convention that is actually saying the statements by Dr. Nevas Mumba don't hold any water because the issues of judicial interference, the issues of continuously referring to a case that was dealt with by the courts does not add value to what the generality of the people of Zimbabwe would want to hear in terms of what the SADC observer mission observed during the elections. What's your take?
You know what, I think that's why, as we have said before, the SADC missed a certain fundamental information about the Zimbabwean setup. They failed to understand how our society operates. The case of who was allowed or not allowed, I don't think was an issue to the major contestants. We are a democracy, right? We would want to see in our ballot everyone who is interested in contesting being on the ballot. But remember, we also have laws and guidelines that guides our processes. So, and institutions that are supposed to be there to interpret and make sure that the laws are applied correctly and the game is fair. That is the issue that they should have been able to understand. So the fact that someone was not allowed to be there had nothing to do with certain political parties. I don't think there was any political party that was scared of anyone because we're a democracy. People would have been voted for anyone that they had wanted to vote for. But the issue is about the legal processes that we have. If someone is not qualified to be on the ballot, if you are not a registered voter, you don't qualify to be on the ballot. It's simple as it is. It has nothing to do with ZANU-PF coming. It has nothing to do. It's about the laws. What does the law say? Because if we had allowed someone who is not on the voters' roll to be on the ballot paper, what it then was going to mean was the whole election was going to be a sham because we had allowed an illegality, right, on this particular process. That's why we have the courts to make sure it's not only in Zimbabwe where the courts are there to make sure that the laws are followed. So I think all the countries, right, on earth, they have a legal processes that operate independently and they make decisions. When they make those particular decisions, everyone in that particular country, according to the laws, must respect. So we just simply did that exactly. We respected what was done by the courts. We accepted the decision, even if some people might not have been happy with the decisions of the court, but those are the decisions of the court. Those are the legal decisions following the law. We just simply have to accept. If we need now to have those particular laws changed, that's why we have a parliament process. The parliament can come in and change certain laws to suit what perhaps would be wanted by the people.
I want us to delve into these issues deeper when we return from this break, but do stay tuned. You're watching ZBC TV. Those of you who have joined us on our social media platforms, on ZBC News channel, as well as on ZBC News Online on Facebook, we do welcome your views and your comments. We have watched a lot of comments coming through, a lot of interaction from all of you. We appreciate that. Keep those comments and views coming through. Also, those of you watching on our Twitter platform, on ZBC News Online, as well as on our YouTube platform at ZBC News Online. We appreciate your company. Otherwise, we'll be back shortly.
2023, Zimbabwe decides. It's the election season. As Zimbabwe decides, all eyes are on ZBC, and the national broadcaster will not disappoint but deliver. Don't be left out in marketing your product on ZBC's platforms. We have an amazing promotion from the 22nd to the 30th of August 2023. ZBC offers you an incredible knockdown on its rate card during the live broadcast of the 2023 general elections. From the election eve, polling day, results announcements, and inauguration. Take the opportunity to advertise on ZBC platforms where large audiences are guaranteed. For your booking, contact Mildred Banda on 071-283-1177 or mildred.banda@zbc.co.zw. ZBC Current Affairs, leading the conversation on local, regional and international news. We bring you the stories that shape the nation and the world, be it social trends, economic and political developments, State of the Nation addresses, independence celebrations, Heroes and Defense Forces Day commemorations, and other national events. We bring them to you as they happen. With an array of informative programming, we bring you face-to-face with the decision makers as we unpack complex issues, giving you a platform to be part of the conversation. You can choose to face the nation and combat crime while talking farming. But remember to keep your vision 2030 during this new normal dominated by COVID Chronicles with ZBC Current Affairs. Together, Sonke Tese, we will track and implement NDS1 to realize a better Zimbabwe. (2023) Zimbabwe decides.
Yes, 2023 Zimbabwe decides, and Zimbabweans decided on the 23rd of August. Of course, the voting process spilling into the 24th of August due to logistical challenges that were faced by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, and of course which have since been addressed. We continue with our discussion. We are centering on the preliminary reports that have been issued by various observer missions to the 2023 general elections in Zimbabwe. In particular, we are focusing on the SADC Observer Mission report, preliminary report delivered by the chairperson, Dr. Nevas Mumba, that pointed to various issues that have actually been a bone of contention and particular points of discussion across the social media, across other platforms. And we are also discussing those with my two panelists here who are the our political analysts. I have Mr. Elton Ziki as well as Dr. Leopold Chakanyuka. Now, I want to come back to you, Mr. Elton, Mr. Ziki, in terms of coverage of political parties by the state media. It was also a very hotly discussed issue in the run-up to the elections, where particularly the opposition were claiming that state-owned media were not affording them the opportunity or equal opportunity with the ruling party in terms of campaigning times, in advertising and so forth. What is your view with regards to what has just been said by the Pan-African Foundation for Social Political Convention Network Trust that said they noted with concern that some of these claims were actually false because state media was reported to have accorded and invited the opposition to come and appear on their various programs, but there was what they called distinct hostility towards state media, to quote what the foundation just said in their report.
Thank you. I think you bring up a very broad issue that does not emanate from the conduct of the 2023 harmonized polls. This is a legacy issue with regards to reportage and information dissemination in Zimbabwe. Well, dating way back up to as early or as late as in the 90s or 2000, late 90s and early 2000, where any information and conduct of the state media has been categorized, has been viewed in some manner of unbelief to a large extent. But we want to pay attention to the fact that over the years, up to 2017, when the second dispensation came into place, you'd want to see a number and a plethora of reforms that have taken place in democratizing the media landscape with regards to information dissemination on political issues that affect the ruling party and the opposition. And you've seen that in 2023, ZBC has already presented a position as a state media to say that there is slots that are open for all political players. And it is heartening to note that these communications, with even the opposition media, they've turned down to appear on state broadcaster. That is a fact, and these records are there with the institution. You'd also want to see that when political players are engaging in political campaigns, for instance, the CCC, you would not really allow Herald reporters being accorded access at those venues. And even if they try to cover, they are maltreated. We do not want to go down that route in this point in time. We are at a defining phase and moment in the history of Zimbabwe because we have decided as a people. And what is important is that Zimbabweans must not get distracted. The distraction of the veracity, the weight of the preliminary reports vis-a-vis with what individual people and those that cast a traceable vote in the ballot on 23 August is what must matter. What has been tallied by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission in terms of the V11s that have been placed and pasted outside each and every polling station with every agent of each and every political player being present is what Zimbabwe must look at. The peaceful nature of the election of the electorate in the queues, the time it would take a single voter from the point of being given the first ballot paper, the second and the third, and by the time of casting that vote in terms of efficiency of the conduct. So really what we must do is to focus on what is important. Has Zimbabwe upheld the constitution in terms of holding elections when they are due? Yes, it has. Despite the shortcomings, but we also must be alive to the good elements that have been ensuing over the years. I want to go back to the media. That is why the state broadcaster and mainstream media has always also accepted that the opposition must have space and voice within its platforms.
I can see you are agreeing, Dr. Chakanyuka.
Yes, I do agree with what he is saying, that when we are talking about the media freedom, it means that the media should be able to report freely and to access places where they want to report. He mentioned about political parties that were barring, state media from reporting. So if you stop me from coming to your rally and report on your rally, and then you then go on and say, well, I'm not reporting about what you are doing, you see,
where do you want me to report
Where do you want me to report from? What it means is you want me to just gather things or to create things on my own and then report, because you are supposed to give me access to where things are happening so that I can be able to report on the things that I am seeing. He also spoke about, which was also talked about by the observers who just are presented, that they noted that public broadcasters had specific programs that were meant for political parties, in political parties to come and sell their manifesto and get into the debates. But in actual fact, for whatever reasons, they decided not to show up. When they decided not to show up, and sometimes we even saw, I remember on one day I saw a program called The Candidate, where one of the presidential candidates from the opposition, but I think it was Professor Maduko or something, was supposed to come. And it was actually reported that we had invited this candidate to come to appear on our program, but unfortunately we even tried to call him, but he wasn't answering his call, but he didn't show up to the program. So he was invited, but he didn't show up for a program that was meant for him to sell his manifesto to the people. And then so I'm saying these are things perhaps that some of the observers did not understand. Perhaps if they had engaged the media to get to understand why these statements were made, or to get a clarification as to why they were not able to cover certain program, I'm sure they would have gotten a true picture of the events that were happening in Zimbabwe. That, if you know, even in the past we have had cases where journalists have also even been beaten, have been attacked by politicians. So we are talking of press freedom. At the same time, we are abusing those very same people that we want to come and cover our programs. It's quite unfair, it's indigenous to say, well, you know, come cover us, but still don't come to us.
Now, your analysis, gentlemen, seems to be pointing to a fact that says the issue of access to the media, particularly during election time, is a hotly contested one, because it's about who has more access than the other, and perhaps also who is being heard more out there than the other. It appears perhaps some of these observers managed to listen or to get one side of this story, and they did not get the other side of the story. I want to ask Mr. Ziki whether it's possible that a report by a whole observer mission can be influenced by the opinions of one person. Is it possible?
There is a possibility. I will not rule out. Let me just hasten to say that it is important that biases in terms of where people come from and what people believe in as their foundational thought process or worldview, in terms of what they would want to be an outcome. Because surely, from an observation point of view, paying attention to the tools that are used in the process of election observation by observer missions the world over, you would want to see that they uphold the principle and perception and view that they should be quite impartial. And impartiality is a key credibility test for election observation missions. So one, in terms of geographical context, where election observations will be coming from, you would know that such a geographical location within Europe, if it is housing a European Union election observer mission, it will then have a European element within its outlook and worldview. So that perception and influence by an individual is quite possible.
So, yeah, I want us briefly, maybe, Doctor, to comment on the same issue that I asked Mr. Ziki, whether we might be able to also, as Zimbabweans, say this kind of an observer mission report was biased because perhaps the chairperson is biased towards a particular political party or has particular views regarding Zimbabwe, and this is why we saw this kind of a report. Could that be a fact?
Of course,
briefly.
There is a possibility. You know, when you have a politician as an observer, sometimes they tend to carry that political hat even right into the observation period. They tend to act as participants rather than observers. So it happens. These, like, let's look at the chairperson. He was is a former vice president. He was also contested in the previous elections, right, in Zambia. So perhaps, as he was observing the elections, he wasn't looking at the elections here in Zimbabwe. He was thinking of his losses in Zambia. Perhaps it could have influenced his perception of this. So what he was expecting, perhaps, right, would be based or classified on the election that happened in his country and the manner in which he lost, or if he had expected to win that particular election, he would come. He had friends, you get it. politicians do have friends and allies. So when you come as a politician to observe an election, you are looking at your allies to see if they are winning. You tend also to listen to the views of your allies more than you become objective. So that could also have had an impact on the position of the SADC.
Dr. Leopold Chaganyuka and Mr. Elton Ziki, our two analysts here in the studio, as we analyze the preliminary reports that have been presented by the observer missions to Zimbabwe's elections. We're now crossing over to our Montrose studios for more.
Thank you very much, Justin. We want to continue giving you election updates as we know that there's so many things going on. We are excited to keep telling the Zimbabwean story and owning the Zimbabwean story. I think it's important for us to also refocus our energies on what the best good for Zimbabwe is at the moment and going forward to build a better Zimbabwe. With me in the studio is Mr. Stevenson Dlamini, who is with me. We've been together most part of the morning just to unpack this deal, unpack what's going on and understand where Zimbabwe is at the moment. Afternoon again.
Afternoon.
So let's just get into maybe a recap of one of the issues that was outstanding earlier on. Given the outcome of the results received so far, the opposition parties seem to have won most of their seats in urban areas, some areas winning more than 90%. How do you see government impacting? How do you see this impacting government policies on the economy and making sure that there's a betterment in our lives? For example, in Bulawayo, the water situation, which is necessary for residential purposes and for industrial use.
Oh, brilliant question. Perhaps we could start off by saying, what does it mean when they've exercised the right to elect officials to represent them in the House of Assembly? We appreciate that the House of Assembly is where policies are made, where policies that have a direct bearing on the livelihoods of people, on the general economy are decided at that point. Having elected those, now it implies that the duty is on their shoulders, the elected officials now, to ensure that they honor the will of the people who have trusted them with that office to bear and create an enabling environment for the better provision of those social amenities, better environment for engaging even external investors to come and improve the provision of services. Because you appreciate part of what they said when they were campaigning is linked towards creation of smart cities.
Yes.
So now it is up to the voters now to hold them accountable. The key word is accountability. The problem is once they have been elected, people just draw back. When it comes to actively participating and holding their elected members accountable for proper service delivery, I think it is now the role of the communities. It is now the role of those that have elected these people into office to ensure that they deliver on their promises, because they are now part of the government and they are under the mandate of the electorate to deliver what they promised the electorate.
So help me understand, help me unpack actually the roadmap an ideal takes from being a social good to something that is enacted as policy. Water running through our taps, we have everything. Like what happens, what are the steps, what offices, who makes sure this is passed? How does that go?
Right, we could take it from the role of the councillor,
yes,
first of all, who is the closest to the electorate.
To ensuring that there's water in my house.
To ensuring that when he sits in that meeting, public meeting, local authority meeting, where they discuss the provision of services, they give reports to the mayor and the concerned councillors. That is the first protocol of decision making. There are some issues that are within the jurisdiction of the local authorities that they themselves can implement. Now, when it comes to the National Assembly, it is their role now in approving a budget that would be sustainable for the ensuring of sustainable provision of the social and amenities that the people need. So it is when they pass the budget. So they need to ensure that their budget is adequate for the local authorities. The size of the devolution funds that they extend to the local authorities must be economically sound to ensure that it ensures quality service delivery. That is how it trickles down from the National Assembly right up to the local authorities, who then ensure that there is water in our taps, clean water, and let's switch
ezininzi nawo ezingasahambeki ngendaba zama-switch. But one of the things that I think is a national priority is resource allocation. And I think there could be a relationship between the stance that has been taken in urban cities, where would you think that it's is it more a cry to the government, or it's just resistance, or is it in support of these local parties? Because I think there's a bigger story that is not told there, because it's visible that, you know, people have voted regardless of knowledge of whoever candidate or whatever their principles or their promises have been. But then there's a need for change. I think it's a cry for change. What can be done in terms of resource allocation and improving resources that are allocated to the cities? Do you see that ever happening?
Well, I would say the question seems to be two-pronged.
Okay.
First of all, we're looking at the nature, the behavior of the electorate.
Okay.
You would appreciate within the electorate there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum of voters. There are some who just vote because the mood says we need to change.
Yes, they just want to stay
with the mood. Yes, they're just following the bandwagon. Then there's a particular sector of the electorate that is more knowledgeable, that is deliberate in their choices of their elected members.
And these should be people in the urban centers, because remember that they are aware of current affairs. They get a documentation on who's corrupt, what are they stealing, where are they stealing from. We have all these figures.
Yes, it is generally assumed that urban voters are more rational in their behavior. Well, that theory has been criticized a number of times, that are they really rational when they exercise their right to vote? Are they rational in electing the officer that they want to represent them? But generally, we would say we assume that the urbanite is more informed and is making a very sound decision whenever they exercise their right. The question would be, are we ready to hold our elected members accountable? Because we have had cries where people would say, we've never seen our MP, we've never seen our councillor, we only see him pitching up in funerals. But all these are reflecting on the decision that we have made to elect them into office. We should appreciate that it doesn't end there. We have a duty as citizens to hold them accountable to what they have promised us, because they are there as representatives, as proxies of our communities. They are there to represent our concerns and help address our needs.
I think that's very important for us to note, that they are public servants.
Yes.
At the end of the day. And, you know, we may call them honorable, Ndlovu, Lamini, etc. But the question is, are they actually practicing what is expected of them, which is to make sure that I have what I need. I voted you into power. So how are you going to serve me? And I think these are some of the most important things. So yeah, Zimbabweans have voted, and most important is the period that we are waiting, that we are in as we wait for the results. But how has the environment been so far?
But I would say the environment has continued to be peaceful and tranquil. Of course, we can't negate the presence of misinformation that we have been witnessing in social media. It's inevitable that there be some people who thrive on misinformation and trying to create. But generally, the environment, I perceive it to be still tranquil. Yes, there's some element of tensity because there's anxiety. Anxiety is inevitable when you are anticipating such a very huge decision that has a major bearing on our lives. So there is that anxiety, but above all, it is anchored on tranquility, and peace.
Hasn't all of this given rise to speculation? I think that there's a lot of speculation, but my greatest concern is the effect of the speculation that is taking place, especially on social media platforms, and people not relying on official information as a stance for a reaction or information.
Well, that is a very critical factor. In fact, we need to speak to the effects or the dangers of misinformation and how it can trigger social and political unrest unnecessarily. We need to have an understanding that there is one authentic source that we all should wait for, so that we do not create an unnecessary conflict which is premised on misinformation or which is premised on deliberate misinformation. So it is critical that we ensure that the authentic source comes from one. We may have various social media platforms which are liberal. People are free to express their views, but they must appreciate the consequences, because once you pick one end of the stick, you automatically pick the other. So I think people need to be made aware of the impact and the potential consequences of deliberately misinforming people, whether through social media, whether through any other platform. It may create an unnecessary and very costly unrest, very costly to address.
I think so. I think